Hello and welcome to my channel, The Gray-Haired Writer. If this is your first time here, thank you for checking me out and welcome again. And if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. I love and appreciate every one of you. Today I am going to talk to you about starting your ordinary world in a crime fiction story. I am going to use both the protagonist and antagonist or villain's perspective. This is one way to plot out a story, or use it as a guideline if you prefer to write your story as a discovery writer, also known as a pantser. I will do a future video on the difference between those types of writing, but for now, I'm just going to stick with the ordinary world. You can find all that in this book here, The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler. Really good book. And now, without further ado, here we go with starting the ordinary world for a crime fiction story. Your best practices for both are to start with a quiet but telling moment. Not necessarily immediate action, although that can work in some instances, like in the movie Heat, one of my favorite movies. If you haven't watched it, make sure you do soon. You will want to establish contrasts between the two characters. Let's have our protagonist, the crime fighter, exhausted from the backlog of cases that must be solved. And for our criminal, have him at the height of his success, possibly going over the spoils from his latest score, or maybe meticulously planning his next heist. Delving deeper into the crime fighter's ordinary world. Start with their daily life. You could have a detective buried in paperwork, or maybe the computer crashed and he can't access a file. You know that feeling, don't you? Of course you do, when you want to take your computer and just toss it out the window and you stop yourself at the last possible instant, remembering you paid a couple $1,000s for it and can't afford to replace it just yet. Not to mention, your insurance probably won't cover the cost of replacing the window since you were the one that smashed it. So you decide to wait to do that until you possibly reach the Stephen King level of income. Probably best to do that until you start smashing your own windows. This could also be a private investigator waiting for the ho-hum of a cheating spouse case to end or another one to begin because he's behind on bills. It could also be a journalist researching a human interest story, blissfully unaware that she is about to uncover a bigger crime. And finally, you could have a forensics expert tying up a minor case. The daily life or possible double life of the criminal could be something along the lines of perhaps you have a respected business person who is hiding dark secrets. Maybe. Your criminal could also be someone who is struggling and is forced into crime due to being financially desperate or motivated by revenge. That's been done several times, like in several of my stories. Or a contract killer or serial killer who blends into the general public. Next. Don't you just love water? Next, you will want to show some personal stakes for the protagonist. This could be a failing relationship or financial problems, or they could have an unresolved case that haunts them to their very core. Or they could be on the verge of quitting or being forced into retirement. For the criminal, you will want to reveal their mindset. This could be your criminal is a meticulous planner setting up their next score. The compulsive killer who gave up his fighting, his dark urges, and is now embracing them fully. Or perhaps the next scheme is about to go horribly wrong because in his hubris, the criminal overlooked something small, or something he thought was small, but it turned out to be huge, and is about to cause his whole world to come crashing down upon him. Next up, for the protagonist, you will want to foreshadow the disruption. And I did a video on foreshadowing. The link for that is in the description. Something that doesn't sit right with the detective maybe it's a small detail uncovered from another case, or a news report, or one of those mysterious calls that tells them to check a certain person out. The detective could also brush off something strange, intending it on getting back to it, but then it turns out it was central to the case. And finally, for the criminal, you'll want to foreshadow their next or first move. This could be testing a weapon, click, click, bang, bang, or maybe they're preparing an alibi. You could have them go places where they would be seen on camera, so they are removed from suspicion, assuming that they are seen on camera when the crime was believed to have been committed. They could also be stalking their next victim. Another thing they could do is inadvertently interact with the detective, creating a close call, which builds tension. Now, shall we create that scene? Yes, of course we shall, or I shall anyway, just to show you how it can work. Starting with the detective, our setting is inside the detective's home office, late at night. Yawning as he stirred his coffee, Detective John Bryce was alone. The smoke from the cigarette swirled up to the ceiling. His only company after his wife died 3 years ago, and their last relationship ended 6 months previously. His dedication to the job ended that. His badge and gun sat on the edge of the desk, just out of hand's reach without him stretching. After 15 years on the force, both items felt more like a ball and chain than anything that would be useful to his life. He flipped through the case files, none of which were his. They were from when he was a rookie patrol officer. A missing man with ties to organized crime. John huffed a derisive laugh at that. That man was probably chugging beers with Jimmy Hoffa. Maybe. A robbery gone wrong, where 2 of the 3 suspects ended up dead. The 3rd was gone with the wind. John wrote on a sticky note that guy had probably killed his partners and took off with all the money. The 3rd was a Jane Doe. Jane Doe found in an alley where these lost causes, he called them unfinished business. The newscast on his computer stole his attention away from the file. The anchor said, authorities are still searching for leads in the disappearance of local art dealer Charles Field. Will that be finished or be wrote off as another lost cause, John wondered. So you see his ordinary world there, the dedicated cop who works at all hours to bring cases to a close. But the job caused problems with relationships. And now, let's do the ordinary world of the criminal. Our setting is a high-rise apartment, late at night, dimly lit. Charles Field's face stared back at him from the TV screen. The broadcast went on and on about the mystery of the man's disappearance. Poor guy was too trusting and too greedy for his own good. A lesson that maybe he'll take with him into his next life, if reincarnation happens. The man watching the broadcast was known to the world as Christopher Rayner. He swirled his 12-year-old scotch in the tumbler, and before he took a sip, he sniffed the drink, letting the aroma tease his taste buds. Christopher was a man who appreciated the finer things in life. Fine art, fine wine, fine scotch and other whiskies, and of course, the finest of craftsmanship, which included the perfect crime. On the table beside him sat the sculpture, 3 feet tall and carefully unwrapped from the protective covering. Rare and beautiful from many years ago. Worth more than most people who weren't professional athletes in one of the big leagues of any sport made in their lifetimes. And it was his, and will be forever his. He closes his eyes and drew in a long breath, exhaling it just as slow. That moment after a job where, everything was so perfect. But then people would start asking questions, and someone like John Bryce, would be on the case and come looking. And when he did, Christopher held his Beretta in his hand, smiling. He'd be ready. So what do you think of that? And there you have it, my friends. Setting up your ordinary world for your crime fiction story. I hope you liked the video and that helped you with your writing and gave you some ideas and inspiration. And if you like, check out the video I did on foreshadowing. It should be coming up now sometime soon. Have a great day, week, and see you next time. Until then, so